The emergency signal tore through every communication channel in the Galactic Assembly like a scream in the night. Ambassador Trin felt her crystalline body vibrate with the distress frequency, a sensation that made her internal light flicker with dread. Around the Grand Chamber, representatives from 40 different species stirred in confusion and alarm. The peaceful hum of diplomatic discussions died instantly. "Help us," the voice crackled through the speakers. "Barely human. Well, not human at all, but belonging to one of the farming species on the colony world of Tender. The Ravagers came without warning. They're burning everything. Please, someone help us. Our children." The transmission dissolved into static, then nothing. High Mediator Quallen floated down from his elevated position, his jellyfish-like body pulsing with distressed colors. His translator device spoke in measured tones despite the panic in his movements. "Assembly members, we have received confirmed reports. The Ravager fleet, approximately 60 warships, has begun orbital bombardment of Tender. Population 400,000, mostly agricultural workers and their families. They have no defensive capabilities." Trin watched as chaos erupted. Senator Vren, whose species had never known war in their 10,000 years of recorded history, made a clicking sound of distress. "We must dispatch the Coalition Defense Fleet immediately." "They are 72 hours away," Quallen responded quietly. "Tender has perhaps 12 hours before the Ravagers complete their attack pattern. They will take slaves and resources, then destroy what remains. This is their pattern. This is what they do. 12 hours. Trin's mind struggled with the mathematics of impossibility. Her people, the Loomis, had evolved on a world where the greatest danger was a sudden temperature drop. They had never developed concepts of warfare, of violence, of deliberate cruelty. None of the soft-world species had. They built their civilization on cooperation, on shared resources, on the fundamental belief that intelligence meant peace. The Ravagers believed differently. "We must negotiate," someone suggested. "Offer them trade concessions." "They don't negotiate," Quallen interrupted, his colors now showing deep purple resignation. "By the time our fleet arrives, there will be nothing left to save. I am sorry. I am truly sorry, but we have no options. We must witness another tragedy and hope our forces can prevent the next one." Trin felt something crack inside her crystalline core. 400,000 people. How many were children? How many had been playing in fields just hours ago? Not knowing that predators from the dark spaces between stars had marked them for destruction. That was when the humans spoke. Captain Rose Bennett had been sitting quietly in the observer section, which was where humanity's representatives usually stayed. The humans had joined the Galactic Assembly only 2 years ago, and most species still found them deeply unsettling. They came from Earth, a world that the Assembly had classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, a planet so hostile that the fact anything intelligent evolved there seemed like a cosmic joke. "We can help," Bennett said simply. The chamber fell silent. Trin turned with the others to look at the human. Bennett was small by Assembly standards, barely reaching the mid-torso of most species, but something about the way she stood made her seem larger. Her species had evolved under crushing gravity, and it showed in her compact, efficient build. "With respect, Captain Bennett," Quallen said carefully, "your nearest military vessels are weeks away at Earth. We appreciate the offer, but the Fifth Fleet is 2 hours from Tender." Bennett interrupted. "We were conducting training exercises in the Outer Arm. Admiral Ortiz received the distress call. He's asking for permission to assist." The chamber erupted. Senator Vren's clicking became a rattling sound of alarm. "Human warships?" "Absolutely not. We've all seen the reports from your world. Your species evolved fighting predators that could crush our bodies with a casual movement. Your gravity would kill most of us within hours. Your weather patterns include winds that could tear apart our habitats. You breathe an atmosphere that's practically corrosive. And you want to send your military?" Bennett's face did something that Trin had learned to recognize as a smile, though it never quite reached the human's eyes. "Yes, we want to send our military. Because in 2 hours we can save those people. In 12 hours they'll all be dead." "Your reputation precedes you," Quallen said quietly. "The reports we've received about human military capabilities are concerning. Your ships are built like weapons, every system designed for combat. Your soldiers carry enough firepower to level buildings. Your fighter craft pull maneuvers that would kill any of our pilots from the acceleration alone. You are Deathworlders, Captain Bennett." "You frighten us, I know," Bennett replied, But right now, 400,000 people are dying. You can be frightened of us later. Let us help them now. Trin found herself speaking before she'd fully formed the thought. What will you do when you arrive? Bennett looked directly at her, and Trin saw something in those strange human eyes. Determination, yes, but also something gentler. Something protective. We'll tell the Ravagers to leave. If they don't listen, we'll make them leave, and we'll keep those civilians safe. That's what we do. You would fight 60 warships with how many vessels? Friend demanded. 20, Bennett answered. It'll be enough. The ambassador wanted to call the human insane. 20 ships against 60? It was suicide. But the alternative was to do nothing. To watch 400,000 beings die because the soft worlds had never learned how to fight. Quallen's colors shifted to a resigned gray. I will put it to an emergency vote. All those in favor of requesting human military intervention? His tentacles made a gesture of futility. Understand that we have no other options. None. We are choosing between certain death for Tender's population or uncertain death by allowing humanity's warriors into our space. The vote passed. It had to. There was no other choice. Bennett stood and nodded once. I'll transmit the coordinates to Admiral Ortiz. He'll be there in 2 hours. She paused at the chamber exit. And Ambassador Quallen? We won't let you down. We know you're scared of us, but those people on Tender are more scared of the Ravagers. Sometimes you need monsters to fight monsters. She left, and Trin felt her internal light flicker again, but this time not entirely from dread. Perhaps from something else. Something that might have been hope, however strange and terrible its form. Warlord Grask watched the farming world burn below and felt satisfied. His targeting officer had just reported that the Western continent's major settlement was ready for ground forces. Soon they would have thousands of new slaves and enough agricultural supplies to feed his fleet for a year. This was easy prey, as most of the coalition worlds were. Soft species, weak species. They had built their civilization on talk and trade, and when real predators came, they folded like paper in fire. His second officer made a chittering sound. Warlord, we're detecting faster-than-light signatures. Multiple contacts. Grask barely looked up from his tactical display. The Coalition Defense Fleet? No, Warlord. The signatures are wrong. These are different. Something in his officer's tone made Grask pause. He'd been raiding Coalition space for 20 cycles, and he knew how their military responded. Slow, cautious, always trying to negotiate first. They would send warning messages, establish communication protocols, probably offer him resources if he'd just leave peacefully. They didn't understand that some species took what they wanted. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. 20 vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Military precision. Grask felt the first tickle of unease in his gut. Identification? His officer's voice wavered. They're broadcasting coalition diplomatic codes, but the ship signatures don't match anything in our database. Warlord, they're moving into attack formation. No warnings, no communication attempts. They're just moving. Grask pulled up the visual feed and felt his blood chill. These weren't coalition ships. Coalition vessels were elegant things, built for exploration and trade with weapons added as an afterthought. These ships were different. Every line, every curve, every visible system screamed purpose. They were weapons that happened to be ship-shaped. Open a channel, he ordered. Let's see who's foolish enough to challenge 60 warships with 20. The human face that appeared on his screen made Grask's unease spike into something closer to fear. He'd heard rumors about humans, the newest species to join the coalition. Deathworlders from a planet that shouldn't have produced anything but corpses. This one had gray fur on his head and face, visible scarring around his eyes, and an expression that held no fear whatsoever. I am Admiral James Ortiz of the Human Fifth Fleet, the creature said in a flat voice. You are currently engaged in military action against a civilian population. You have 60 seconds to break off your attack and leave this system. Grask's unease transformed into rage. This tiny species, barely known in the galaxy, was giving him ultimatums? You dare threaten me with 20 ships? I have 60 warships and 5,000 warriors. Leave now, human, or I'll add your crew to my slave pens. The human's expression didn't change. 50 seconds. You're insane. You can't possibly, but 40 seconds. I'm not negotiating with you. I'm giving you a chance to survive. After that, we'll remove you from this system by force. Grask cut the transmission. All ships, new priority targets. Destroy those human vessels. Show them what happens when someone challenges the Ravagers. His fleet moved to engage 60 warships against 20. The numerical advantage was overwhelming. This would be over in minutes. Then the humans opened fire, and Grask realized he'd made a terrible mistake. The human ships moved like nothing he'd ever seen. They didn't maneuver like coalition vessels, graceful and smooth. They moved with violent efficiency, spinning and accelerating at speeds that should have torn them apart. His targeting system struggled to track them. The weapons fire was worse. Coalition ships used energy weapons that heated hulls and drained shields. Human weapons used kinetic projectiles that punched through armor like it wasn't there. Railguns, his database informed him. Ancient technology accelerated to modern speeds. Chunks of metal moving at a significant fraction of light speed. 3 of his ships died in the first 30 seconds. Evasive patterns, Grask roared. Return fire. His fleet tried. They were experienced raiders. Veteran crews who'd fought dozens of battles, but they'd never fought anyone who fought back like this. The humans didn't try to disable ships or target weapon systems. They went straight for the kill. Power cores, life support, engine assemblies. Every shot meant to cripple or destroy, and their small craft were even worse. Human fighters launched from carrier vessels. Pilots sitting in tiny cockpits pulling maneuvers that would liquefy any normal species from the acceleration forces. They swarmed around his larger ships like insects, too fast to target effectively, each one carrying weapons that could crack a warship's armor. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka grinned inside her fighter's cockpit as she lined up another shot. The G-forces were crushing. Her flight suit was doing its job keeping blood in her brain, but she could feel the strain anyway. 12 Gs in that last turn. Any of the soft species would be paced. But humans evolved running down prey across entire continents. Evolved building muscles that could throw stones hard enough to kill. Evolved in gravity that made them dense and strong. She triggered her weapons. Missiles streaked away, guided by her fighter's targeting computer. They slammed into a Ravager destroyer's engine port. Secondary explosions rippled along the hull. Tango down, she reported calmly. Moving to next target. Her squadron followed her through a debris field that had been 3 Ravager ships 10 minutes ago. Coalition observers aboard the human flagship were broadcasting the entire battle back to the assembly. Let them see. Let them understand what humans were capable of when they chose to fight. Aboard the flagship Defiant, Admiral Ortiz watched his tactical display with practiced calm. His ships had taken damage, the Ravagers weren't completely incompetent, but human vessels were built with redundancy that would seem paranoid to most species. They had backup systems for their backup systems. Losing main power just meant switching to secondary reactors. Hull breaches meant sealing sections and continuing to fight. Because humans evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them, and they'd learned to build their technology the same way they built their bodies. Tough, redundant, and stubborn. Warlord Grask is attempting to flee, his tactical officer reported. Pursuit course, Ortiz ordered. Disable his engines, but don't destroy him. I want him alive to send a message. 3 human destroyers broke formation and went after Grask's command ship. Their weapons fire was surgical now, precise. They crippled the vessel's main drives and left it drifting. Ortiz opened a channel. Warlord Grask, you're done. Surrender your remaining ships or we'll destroy them all. The alien's face on the screen showed pure terror now. What are you? We're humans, Ortiz said simply. We're from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to fight because we had no choice, and now we use that knowledge to protect people who can't protect themselves. Your remaining ships have 10 seconds to power down weapons and accept surrender. 23 Ravager vessels surrendered. 15 tried to run. The human fleet hunted down and crippled 12 of them. 3 escaped into faster-than-light travel. The battle lasted 1 hour and 17 minutes. The human fleet had destroyed or disabled 47 enemy vessels without losing a single ship, though several were heavily damaged. Ambassador Trin watched the battle footage from Tender's surface, where she'd transported down to coordinate relief efforts. Around her, the assembly observers stood in stunned silence. These were the Deathworlders. These were the species everyone feared, and they'd just saved 400,000 lives without hesitation. Dr. Petra Wolf had been awake for 16 hours straight and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from exhaustion, though she was exhausted. Not from fear. though she'd operated through 3 emergency alerts while the ship was under fire. Her hands shook because she just saved the life of a child who shouldn't have needed saving. The young Loomis, the locals called her Pip, had been caught in the initial bombardment. Crystalline species were beautiful but fragile, and the explosion had shattered her left side into hundreds of fractures. Petra had spent 4 hours carefully realigning and fusing the crystal matrix, while Pip's biological light flickered weakly. Any mistake would have killed her, but Petra didn't make mistakes. Couldn't afford to. She was human, from a world where a simple fall could break bones, where microscopic organisms caused plagues, where the weather could kill you in a dozen different ways. Human medicine had evolved to be aggressive, innovative, and stubborn. They'd learned to fight death itself. Pip was sleeping now in the recovery unit, her internal light steady and strong. She'd live. She'd grow up. She'd maybe remember the human doctor who'd refused to let her die. Petra finally stepped out of the medical bay and nearly collided with Corporal Dan Hayes, who was carrying supplies toward the temporary shelter. He caught her elbow automatically, steadying her. "Doc, you need to rest." "So do you," Petra shot back. Hayes had been running rescue operations for the same 16 hours, pulling survivors from collapsed buildings. His armor was covered in dust and dried blood, hopefully none of it his own. Hayes shrugged. "I'll rest when everyone's safe." That was the human way, Petra thought. They kept going because stopping meant people died, and humans had decided somewhere in their evolution that death was the enemy they'd never stop fighting. Ambassador Trin watched the human soldiers move through the refugee camp with a mixture of fascination and fear. They were so small compared to most species, yet they moved with such purpose. Each one carried enough weapons to hold off a small army. Their armor was scarred and dented from the battle, but still functional. They scanned constantly, checked corners, maintained fields of fire even though the threat was gone. They couldn't turn it off, Trin realized. Their entire species had evolved in a state of constant vigilance. Earth hadn't just been dangerous, it had been relentlessly hostile. So humans had learned to be relentless back. But then Trin watched Corporal Hayes kneel down next to a group of children huddled together. The little ones were from 3 different species, all traumatized, all terrified. Hayes carefully set his rifle aside, held up his empty hands, and started talking to them in a soft voice. "Hey there, little ones. My name's Dan. I know you're scared. I know today was really bad. But you're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you. I promise." A tiny Loomis child, Pip, the one Dr. Wolf had saved, cautiously approached Hayes. She was barely as tall as his knee. She reached up with one crystalline hand and touched his armored forearm. Hayes went very still, like he was afraid any movement might scare her away. "It's okay. You're okay now." Pip looked up at him with those large, luminescent eyes. "Are you a monster?" she asked in her small voice. Trin felt her internal light freeze. The child was asking what everyone wondered, but was too polite to say. Hayes considered the question seriously. "I guess some people think so. We come from a scary place and we learn to be scary to survive. But we're not here to scare you. We're here to keep you safe. Does that make sense?" Pip thought about it, then nodded. She didn't move away from him. Instead, she pressed closer, and Hayes carefully wrapped one armored arm around her in what humans called a hug. The other children watched, and slowly, one by one, they approached too. Within minutes, Hayes was surrounded by traumatized children from multiple species, all seeking comfort from the armored Deathworlder who'd fought to save their world. Trin recorded everything. The assembly needed to see this. They needed to understand that these humans, these terrifying warriors from a nightmare world, were also capable of extraordinary gentleness. She continued documenting as human soldiers shared their food rations with hungry civilians. The rations were designed to be compatible with multiple species biology. Humans had learned to adapt, to think about others, because cooperation was as vital to their survival as combat. She recorded Dr. Wolf stumbling with exhaustion, but still checking on every patient in the medical tents. She recorded engineers working alongside local civilians to restore power systems. She recorded fighter pilot Yuki Tanaka sitting with a group of young Loomis females, teaching them a human game involving patterns drawn in the dirt. The humans were strange. They carried weapons everywhere and moved like coiled springs ready to explode into violence. But they also laughed with civilians, played with children, and worked themselves to collapse, helping rebuild what the Ravagers had destroyed. Back in the Galactic Assembly Chamber, the emergency session had been running for hours. High Mediator Quan had presented the battle footage, and now they were watching the aftermath videos Trin had sent. Senator Vren stood to speak, his translator making clicking sounds. I move that we place restrictions on human military operations within Coalition space. They are too dangerous, too violent. Yes, they saved Tender, but at what cost? We saw their weapons, their tactics. They are Deathworlders. We cannot allow such beings unrestricted access. Before Qualn could respond, Captain Rose Bennett entered the chamber. She walked directly to the speaker's platform without asking permission. You want to restrict us? She asked quietly. Fine, pass your motion. Limit our military to human-controlled space. Just understand what you're choosing. We're choosing safety, Vren replied. You frighten us, Captain. Surely you can understand that. Bennett looked around the chamber at the assembled species. I do understand. You evolved in gentle places. Most of your predators were small. Your gravity was light. Your weather was mild. You developed intelligence in paradise. You built civilizations based on cooperation because you never needed to learn violence. She activated a holographic display showing Tender's surface. But the universe isn't gentle. There are species like the Ravagers who take what they want and kill what they can't use. And when they come for you, what will you do? Talk at them? Negotiate? Hope they'll see reason? The chamber was silent. We humans learned violence because we had no choice, Bennett continued. But we also learned something else. We learned that strength without purpose is just destruction. We fight to protect. We kill to save lives. And yes, we scare you. We scare ourselves sometimes. But 400,000 people on Tender are alive because we chose to use our violence for them. She looked directly at Vren. So pass your restrictions if you want. Just remember this moment the next time you need someone who knows how to fight. Before anyone could respond, alarms shrieked through the chamber. Quan's colors flashed to emergency red. Priority alert, he announced, his voice shaking. We're receiving a transmission from Warlord Grask. He's transmitted it to every Coalition world simultaneously. The display showed Grask's face, twisted with rage and hate. You humiliated me, humans. You cost me my fleet. So I've called in every favor, every alliance, every debt. 300 Ravager warships are coming to Tender. We're going to destroy that world and everyone on it. And we're going to make you watch while we do it. The transmission ended. The chamber descended into chaos. Trin felt her internal light flickering with terror. 300 ships. The human fleet had barely survived 60. She looked at Captain Bennett, expecting to see fear or despair. Instead, Bennett was already pulling up her communication device. Get me Admiral Ortiz, and tell him we need to prepare for round 2. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka felt the hostile targeting locks paint her fighter like searchlights in the dark, and pushed her craft into a spin that would have killed most species instantly. 9 Gs of force crushed her into her seat, her vision grayed at the edges. The targeting locks lost her signature for 3 precious seconds. She used those seconds to put a missile through the sensor array of a Ravager cruiser. All around her, space was burning. The Ravager Revenge fleet had arrived exactly as promised. 300 warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in a formation designed to surround Tender completely. No escape, no reinforcements possible. Just 20 battered human ships standing between 400,000 civilians and obliteration. The math was simple and brutal. 15-to-1 odds. Admiral Ortiz had called it a target-rich environment. Yuki called it suicide. She loved her species' stubborn refusal to acknowledge impossible odds. Go Squadron, form up on me, she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. We're going for that carrier group at Grid 7. If we can take out their fighter support, the Defiant can concentrate fire on the heavy ships. Copy that, Ghost Leader. We're with you. Her squadron dove toward the Ravager carrier, 12 human fighters against a wall of enemy fire. They weaved through the destruction like dancers, each pilot pushing their bodies to the absolute limit of human endurance. The soft species thought humans were crazy for building fighters that pulled such extreme acceleration. They didn't understand that humans had evolved specifically to endure punishment that would kill others. Yuki's targeting computer screamed warnings. Too many hostile contacts. Too much incoming fire. Impossible to evade everything. She evaded anyway. Aboard the flagship Defiant, Admiral James Ortiz watched his tactical display and calculated how long his fleet could survive. His ship was already running on backup power. Main engines were offline. 6 of 20 human vessels were combat ineffective, drifting but still firing with whatever weapon systems remained functional. The crew refused to abandon ship while civilians needed protecting. That was the human way. You held the line. You bought time. You didn't quit until your body literally stopped working. Admiral, the Ravagers are moving into bombardment position, his tactical officer reported. Young kid, barely 25, with blood running down his face from where a console had exploded during the last attack wave. He should be in medical. He refused to leave his post. Ortiz was proud of him, proud of all of them. All ships maintain defensive sphere around Tender. They want to hit the planet, they go through us first. It was a suicidal tactical decision. Military doctrine said you should use mobility, hit and run, preserve your forces. But military doctrine didn't account for 400,000 civilians who had nowhere to run. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surface. Ambassador Trin is broadcasting to the assembly. Ortiz pulled up the feed. Trin was in one of the emergency bunkers on Tender's surface, surrounded by civilians from a dozen species. Children pressed against their parents. The elderly held the young. Everyone was terrified. Galactic Assembly, Trin spoke clearly, her crystalline body glowing with emotion. You are watching this live. The human fleet is dying to protect us. They've been in continuous combat for 6 hours. Half their ships are crippled. They're outnumbered 15 to 1. By every logical calculation, they should retreat and save themselves. Trin looked directly into the camera, and Ortiz saw tears, actual liquid tears, which were impossible for crystalline beings. She was crying through sheer emotional force, but they won't retreat, because humans don't abandon people who need them. I was wrong about them. We were all wrong. They're not monsters. They're guardians. And they're going to die for us because that's what humans do. The transmission continued broadcasting as another wave of Ravager ships moved in. Ortiz could see the formation. They were going to try to break through the human defensive line by concentrating fire on a single point. All ships, reinforce grid 4. Move now. His fleet responded instantly despite their damage. Human ships moved to fill the gap, overlapping fields of fire supporting each other. The Ravagers came at them like a hammer. The human fleet was the anvil that refused to break. Yuki brought her fighter limping back toward the Defiant after her third sortie. Half her squadron was gone. Her fighter had taken so much damage that it was barely holding together. One engine was dead. Life support was failing. She was running on emergency oxygen and pure determination. Ghost Leader to Defiant requesting emergency landing clearance. Negative, Ghost Leader. The response came back. Defiant's landing bay is exposed to vacuum. We took a direct hit. Yuki checked her fuel. Enough for maybe another 10 minutes of combat. Then she'd be drifting in space waiting for a rescue that probably wouldn't come. Copy that, Defiant. Redirecting to combat zone. I've still got weapons. Yuki, you need to. I've still got weapons, she repeated firmly. Ghost Leader moving to engage. She turned her dying fighter toward the enemy and kept fighting. On Tender's surface, Corporal Dan Hayes had organized the civilian volunteers into an emergency response network. They couldn't fight the battle in space, but they could prepare for the worst. Every bunker was reinforced. Every emergency system was checked and rechecked. When the Ravagers broke through, the civilians would have every possible second to evacuate to the deepest shelters. Little Pip followed Hayes everywhere, refusing to leave his side. Other children had attached themselves to different human soldiers. They understood somehow that these warriors would fight to their last breath to keep them safe. Dan, Pip asked in her small voice. Are we going to die? Hayes knelt down so he was eye level with her. He was exhausted, running on stimulants and willpower, but he made his voice gentle. Not if I can help it, little one. Not if any of us can help it. But there are so many of them. There are, Hayes admitted. But humans are really, really stubborn. We don't quit. It's basically our species' superpower. Pip thought about that, then nodded seriously. She reached into a pocket and pulled out a small crystal shard, part of her body that had broken off during the initial attack. This is for luck. My mother said crystal pieces carry part of our light. Keep it, so you can keep fighting. Hayes took the crystal carefully and tucked it into his armor's inner pocket right over his heart. Thank you, Pip. I'll keep it safe. Back in space, Admiral Ortiz watched his fleet disintegrate around him. They'd held for 8 hours. 8 impossible hours against overwhelming force. But physics didn't care about courage. Math didn't care about determination. The Defiant's backup power was failing. More systems went dark every minute. His crew kept fighting, kept firing, kept holding that defensive line even as their ship was torn apart around them. "Admiral," his tactical officer said quietly, "we're getting new faster-than-light signatures. Multiple contacts." Ortiz felt a cold weight in his stomach. More Ravagers? They'd bring enough force to crush what remained of his fleet in minutes. Identification? The tactical officer's face transformed from despair to shock, to something that might have been hope. "Sir, they're coalition vessels. Lots of them. Admiral, I'm reading over 100 ships, multiple species. They're dropping out of faster-than-light travel in attack formation." Ortiz pulled up the tactical display and felt something crack in his chest, not breaking. Opening. The cavalry had arrived. High Mediator Quallen's voice came through on all channels, his translator device filled with emotion. "Human fleet, this is Coalition Defense Force. We're here. You held the line. Now we stand with you." Behind Quallen's command ship, vessels from 40 different species moved into battle positions. The soft world species that had never known war, had never wanted war, had spent the last 8 hours watching humans die to protect strangers. And they'd decided that if these Deathworlders could be brave, then maybe they could be too. Senator Vren's ship fired its weapons for the first time in its entire service record. The targeting was clumsy, the tactics uncertain, but the intent was pure. They'd come to fight. The Ravager fleet found itself suddenly facing not 20 dying human ships, but over 150 coalition vessels, with more arriving every minute. Warlord Grask saw his numerical advantage evaporate, and knew he'd made the mistake that would end his entire fleet. The tide of battle turned, and the humans finally had allies who understood why some things were worth dying for. High Mediator Quallen had never fired a weapon in his life. His species had evolved in peaceful oceans where cooperation meant survival, and conflict was settled through bioluminescent communication. Violence was alien to everything he was, everything his people had ever been. Yet here he floated on the bridge of his command vessel, watching targeting solutions scroll across displays he'd never thought he'd use in anger, preparing to order beings killed. The humans had taught him something in their 8 hours of desperate fighting. Sometimes peace required people willing to do violence. Sometimes protecting the innocent meant becoming someone you never wanted to be. All coalition vessels, he broadcast across every frequency, his translator carrying his words to 40 different species. "Target the Ravager fleet. Work in coordination with human forces. And remember, we fight for tender. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." The coalition fleet opened fire, and space became chaos. The soft world species weren't natural warriors. Their weapons were less powerful than human armaments. Their tactics were uncertain. Their crews were terrified. But they kept firing anyway, kept pushing forward, kept supporting each other because 8 hours of watching humans die had taught them what courage actually meant. A Loomis energy cruiser took position alongside the crippled human destroyer Valiant. The Loomis shields weren't as strong as human armor, but they could share their defensive energy. The two ships, one nearly dead but still fighting, one terrified but determined, covered each other's weaknesses. "Valiant, this is Loomis Vessel Brightness. We're extending our shields to cover your damaged sections." "Copy that, Brightness," came the tired human voice. "Appreciate the help. We'll handle the heavy hitting, you keep us alive." It was the beginning of something new. Soft world defense and Deathworlder offense working together. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka had accepted she was going to die in her fighter when a swarm of coalition craft appeared around her. They were insectoid krill fighters, smaller and more fragile than hers, but they moved in perfect coordination. Dozens of them formed a protective screen, their combined fire driving back the Ravager ships that had been pursuing her. "Human fighter, this is Krill Squadron 12. We studied your combat recordings. We're not as strong individually, but there are many of us. Let us help." Yuki felt her throat tighten with emotion. These beings had watched humans fight and learned. Not just the tactics, but the why. "Copy that, Krill Squadron. Let's clear some space." Together, one human fighter and 50 krill craft dove back into the battle. Yuki's heavy weapons and the krill's swarming tactics created a combination that the Ravagers couldn't counter. They complemented each other perfectly, human aggression and alien cooperation. Aboard the Defiant, Admiral Ortiz watched the tactical situation transform. His fleet was barely functional, running on fumes and stubbornness, but with coalition support they'd stabilized the defensive line. More than stabilized, they were pushing back. "Admiral, we're getting a transmission from Warlord Grask. He's requesting surrender terms." Ortiz pulled up the visual feed. Grask's command ship was surrounded by coalition vessels. His escape routes were blocked. His fleet was being systematically dismantled by the combined force of human firepower and coalition numbers. "This is Admiral Ortiz. You wanted revenge, Warlord. You brought 300 ships to kill civilians. What terms did you think we'd offer?" Grask's face was twisted with hatred and fear. "You're monsters. All of you. You've corrupted the soft species, turned them into killers like you." "No." Captain Rose Bennett's voice cut in. She'd transported to the Defiant during the battle to coordinate diplomatic efforts. "We didn't corrupt them. We showed them that strength isn't evil when it's used to protect, that courage isn't violence when it's defending innocence. You taught them they needed to fight. We just showed them how. Surrender your fleet now," Ortiz said firmly, "or we'll destroy every ship that doesn't power down weapons immediately. You have 30 seconds. Grask started to respond with another threat, but one of his own officers moved behind him, pressing a weapon to his head. The officer spoke directly to the camera. "We surrender. We're done taking orders from him. We're done with all of this." 23 Ravager ships surrendered immediately, powering down weapons and accepting coalition boarding parties. Grask tried to fight back, but his own crew had revolted. They'd seen their fleet broken by species they'd thought were weak, realized their cause was lost. 30 more ships tried to run. Coalition vessels moved to intercept, but they were too slow, too inexperienced at pursuit tactics. "Defiant to coalition forces, we'll handle the runners," Ortiz announced. "You've done enough. Guard the surrendered vessels." 6 human ships broke formation, the only ones with engines still functional enough for pursuit. They were damaged, barely holding together, running on backup power in sealed compartments. By every reasonable measure, they should retreat to repair facilities. They chased down 15 fleeing Ravager vessels and crippled them. The other 15 escaped, but Ortiz didn't consider it a failure. They'd broken the Ravager fleet, saved Tender, and shown the galaxy that humans didn't abandon those who needed them. All human vessels returned to defensive positions. "Prepare for emergency repairs and medical evacuations." His tactical officer collapsed at his station, finally allowing exhaustion and blood loss to claim him. Medical teams rushed to his position. Around the bridge, crew members were slumped over consoles, barely conscious but still monitoring their stations. "Sir," his communications officer said weakly, "Ambassador Trin is requesting to speak with you." Ortiz pulled up the transmission. Trin was still in the bunker on Tender's surface, surrounded by civilians who were crying with relief. Children were cheering. Adults were embracing. Species that had never touched each other were pressed together in shared joy at survival. "Admiral Ortiz," Trin said, her crystalline body glowing brighter than he'd ever seen. "You did it. You saved us, all of us." Ortiz felt the weight of 8 hours of combat finally hit him. His hands were shaking. His vision was blurry. He realized he was crying. Humans did that sometimes when the adrenaline finally stopped. "We didn't do it alone," he managed to say. "Your people came. The coalition came. Everyone chose to stand and fight because you showed us how," Trin responded. "Because humans refused to give up even when everything was lost. You taught the soft worlds that we could be strong too." The transmission ended and Ortiz allowed himself to slump in his command chair. Around him, his bridge crew was being evacuated to medical bays. His ship was dying, systems failing one by one. But they'd held. They'd protected those civilians, that was enough. Corporal Dan Hayes emerged from the bunker with Pip still holding his hand. The child refused to let go, and honestly, Hayes didn't want her to. Around them, other human soldiers were being mobbed by grateful civilians. Children from a dozen species clung to the armored warriors who'd stood between them and death. Dr. Petra Wolf was accepting a traditional Loomis gratitude crystal from an elderly patient she'd saved. The crystal pulsed with inner light, a permanent gift that carried a fragment of the giver's essence. It was the highest honor the Loomis could bestow. High Mediator Qualm transported down to Tender's surface personally. He approached Captain Bennett, his jellyfish-like body showing colors of respect and apology. Captain Bennett, I was wrong about your species. We were all wrong. You are not monsters. You are, I believe the human word is heroes. Bennett smiled tiredly. We're just people, Mediator. People from a hard place who learned to protect softer places. That's all. That's everything, Quallen corrected. The Coalition has a proposal for you. For all of humanity, we want you to help train our forces. Not to make us killers, but to teach us how to defend ourselves and others. Will you help us? Bennett looked at the celebrating civilians, at the human soldiers being thanked by beings from across the galaxy, at the mixed fleet in orbit where former enemies were now working together to repair damaged vessels. Yeah, she said. We'll help. That's what humans do. In orbit, Yuki managed to land her dying fighter on a Loomis carrier. The landing was terrible, scraping and bouncing, but she survived. When she climbed out of the cockpit, Krill pilots swarmed around her, clicking excitedly, asking her to teach them more maneuvers. She laughed, exhausted and exhilarated. Sure, but first someone get me some water. And maybe a stretcher. I think I broke some ribs. As she was being carried to medical, she looked up at the stars through the carrier's observation ports. Somewhere out there, 300 Ravager ships had arrived planning to destroy a world. They'd found humans instead. She hoped word would spread. She hoped every raider, every slaver, every predator species in the galaxy would hear what happened at Tender. The soft worlds had guardians now, and those guardians were done being feared. They'd rather be trusted. 6 weeks had passed since the battle for Tender, and the Galactic Assembly Chamber had never been so full. Representatives from every coalition species crowded the space, with thousands more watching via live transmission across hundreds of worlds. Today would determine the future of human coalition relations. Today would answer the question everyone had been asking since the battle: what do we do with the Deathworlders? Ambassador Trin stood at the speaker's platform, her crystalline body glowing with nervous energy. Beside her stood little Pip, who'd refused to be left behind. The child wore a small badge showing Earth's blue and green surface, a gift from Corporal Hayes before his ship left for repairs. Members of the Assembly, Trin began, we gather today to address humanity's role in our coalition. Senator Vren has proposed a historic motion, that humans should lead our combined military defense forces. Before we vote, I wish to share something with you. The chamber lights dimmed, holographic displays activated throughout the space, showing footage from the battle and its aftermath. But these weren't the combat recordings everyone had already seen. These were personal recordings, intimate moments that Trin had collected over the past 6 weeks. The first video showed Dr. Petra Wolf in a medical tent, working on her 16th hour without rest. A young Loomis child was crying in pain, and Wolf was humming something soft, a human lullaby Trin had learned, while carefully treating crystalline fractures. The doctor's hands were steady despite exhaustion, her voice gentle despite the chaos around her. This is a monster, Trin asked quietly. A being who sings to frightened children while saving their lives? The next recording showed Corporal Hayes in an emergency bunker during the worst of the bombardment. Civilians from 5 different species huddled together in terror. Hayes was telling them stories, making them laugh despite the explosions overhead, keeping their minds away from fear. When a support beam cracked and looked ready to collapse, Hayes positioned himself underneath it, holding it up with his own strength while evacuation proceeded. This is something to fear, Trin continued. A warrior who uses his body as a shield for strangers? More recordings played. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka teaching Krill pilots advanced maneuvers, patient and encouraging. Admiral Ortiz refusing evacuation from his dying ship until every crew member was safe first. Captain Bennett spending 18 hours straight coordinating relief efforts, organizing supplies, making sure every civilian had food and shelter, humans helping rebuild homes. Humans sharing medical supplies, humans laughing with alien children, humans crying at memorial services for coalition soldiers who died fighting beside them. Senator Vren stood slowly, his translator making soft clicking sounds. Trin had spoken with him privately before this session, sharing her recordings explaining what she'd witnessed. I wish to withdraw my previous motion to restrict human military operations, Vren announced, and I wish to apologize to humanity and to this assembly. The chamber stirred with surprise. I was wrong, Vren continued. I judged humans based on fear, on surface appearances, on the assumption that strength meant cruelty. but I have spent 6 weeks reviewing evidence, speaking with survivors, learning about human culture and history. He pulled up his own display showing Earth's surface, beautiful and terrible, a world of extremes that no soft-world species would survive unaided. Humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. They could have become bitter, cruel, focused only on their own survival. Instead, they developed concepts of honor, duty, sacrifice. They learned that protecting the vulnerable wasn't weakness but the highest form of strength. Vren turned to face the human delegation. Captain Bennett stood there with Admiral Ortiz, freshly released from medical care. His injuries would take months to fully heal, but he'd insisted on attending. "I propose a new motion," Vren said, "that humanity be granted full authority to train and lead coalition defense forces, that we establish a joint command structure combining human tactical expertise with coalition resources, that we finally acknowledge what we should have understood from the beginning. We need them. Not just their weapons or their warriors, but their wisdom about what it means to be strong for others." High Mediator Quallen floated to the central platform, his body showing colors of solemn respect. The motion is seconded. "Before we vote, does the human delegation wish to speak?" Captain Bennett stepped forward. Trin noticed how small she looked compared to most species, yet how her presence somehow filled the chamber. That was a human quality. They projected confidence and determination that went far beyond physical size. "Members of the Assembly," Bennett began, "6 weeks ago, you were frightened of us. Honestly, I understood. We are scary. We evolved fighting, killing, surviving against odds that would break most species. We carry that legacy in everything we do." She paused, looking around the chamber at dozens of different species. "But we also carry something else. Humans have a saying, those who have seen darkness appreciate light. We know what it's like to be vulnerable. We know what it's like to be prey. Our ancestors spent thousands of years as prey to bigger, stronger predators. We remember that fear in our bones. That's why we fight the way we do," Bennett continued. "Not because we love violence. We hate it. We've seen too much of it. But we've also learned that sometimes the only way to protect peace is to be willing to fight for it, to stand between predators and prey, to be the guardian that our ancestors wished they'd had." Little Pip suddenly spoke up, her small voice carrying clearly in the silent chamber. "Humans saved us. They didn't know us. They didn't owe us anything. But they came anyway. They fought for us. Some of them died for us. That's what I'll remember. Not that they're scary. That they're brave." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Quallen spoke. "All members in favor of granting humanity authority over coalition military defense and establishing joint command structure?" The vote was unanimous. Trin felt her internal light surge with emotion. Around the chamber, representatives from every species were standing in respect. The humans had proven themselves not through fear but through action, not through threats but through sacrifice. "There is one more matter," Quallen announced. "The survivors of Tender have requested permission to present something to the human fleet." The display changed to show a memorial that had been constructed on Tender's surface. It was massive, built in a style that combined elements from 40 different species architecture. At its center was a simple inscription in every coalition language. They stood when others could not. They fought when others would not. They saved us when no one else would. This is how humanity became our guardians. Below the inscription were names. 873 names. Every human who died during the siege. "This memorial," Quallen said softly, "will stand for as long as Tender exists. Future generations will know what happened here. They'll know that when darkness came, humanity brought light." Admiral Ortiz stood with difficulty, his injuries obvious. "With respect, Mediator, we don't need monuments. We need to make sure this never happens again, that no colony, no civilian population ever feels that helpless." "Then help us," Quallen responded. "Teach our forces. Train our soldiers. Show us how to be strong enough to protect ourselves and others. Not to be warriors like you. We'll never have your history, your evolution, your capabilities. But teach us to be brave like you." Ortiz looked at Captain Bennett, at the assembled coalition representatives, at little Pip wearing her Earth badge with pride. "We'll teach you," he agreed. "We'll share everything we know about defense, tactics, courage. But you have to teach us too. Teach us about cooperation, diplomacy, building peace, because humans are good at fighting, but we're still learning how to build what comes after." "Agreed," Quallen said immediately. This will be a true partnership. Humanity provides martial strength and protective purpose. The coalition provides diplomatic wisdom and unified resources. Together we'll be stronger than either alone. The formal proceedings ended and the chamber dissolved into conversations between species who'd rarely interacted before. Humans explaining tactical concepts to coalition officers. Coalition representatives sharing cultural knowledge with human diplomats. Everyone learning from everyone else. Trin found herself standing with Captain Bennett watching the interactions. "You changed everything," Trin said. "In 6 weeks you transformed how the entire galaxy sees humanity." Bennett shook her head. "We just showed you who we really are. The galaxy wanted to see monsters, so they saw monsters. But we've always been more than that. Every human child grows up learning stories about heroes who protect others. We're not special. We just choose to be what we wish we'd had when our ancestors were afraid. That's what makes you special," Trin insisted. "You could have used your strength to dominate. You chose to protect instead." On Earth, 6 weeks after the Battle of Tender, recruitment centers for the new Coalition Defense Force were overwhelmed. Young humans lined up for kilometers, eager to serve, to prove their species' worth, to be guardians for worlds they'd never seen. An elderly human woman stood at one center, watching the young people volunteer. She'd lived through humanity's first contact with the Coalition, remembered the fear and prejudice, the constant suspicion. Now she watched humans and aliens working together, preparing to defend each other. "We finally found our place," she said to her companion. "For so long, humans wondered why we evolved the way we did. Why we're so much stronger, more aggressive, more resilient than we need to be for modern life. Now we know. We evolved this way so we could protect those who didn't." Back on Tender, Corporal Hayes visited the memorial one last time before shipping out. His unit was being transferred to a new joint species training facility. He'd be teaching Coalition soldiers about ground combat, defensive tactics, how to protect civilians in hostile situations. Little Pip had followed him as she always did when he visited the surface. She placed a small crystal flower at the base of the memorial, honoring the humans who'd died protecting her world. "Will you come back?" she asked. Hayes knelt down beside her. "Maybe someday. But wherever I go, I'll carry this." He touched his chest where her crystal gift still rested in his armor's inner pocket. "A piece of Tender. A piece of you. To remind me why we fight." "To protect people," Pip said seriously. "Exactly, little one. To protect people." In orbit, the repaired human fleet prepared to depart. Mixed crews now staffed every vessel, humans working alongside Loomis, Krill, and dozens of other species. The soft worlds were learning from the Deathworlders, and the Deathworlders were learning from the soft worlds. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka sat in her fighter's cockpit, now part of a mixed squadron. Half human, half Krill. They'd trained together for 6 weeks, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses, building trust through shared purpose. "Ghost Leader to all wings, prepare for departure." "Copy that, Ghost Leader," came the responses in a dozen different languages, a dozen different voices, all unified in purpose. As the fleet moved away from Tender, Yuki looked back at the planet that had changed everything. A world that had almost died but survived because people chose to be brave. She'd heard the stories spreading across the galaxy now. Stories about the human fleet that refused to retreat. Stories about Deathworlders who fought not for conquest but for protection. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans were dangerous, yes. They were warriors born from a nightmare world, yes. But they were also guardians, protectors, the ones who showed up when others couldn't or wouldn't. The soft worlds had spent millennia building a civilization of peace. Now they had partners who understood that sometimes peace needed people willing to fight for it. Not because they loved violence, but because they loved those too vulnerable to protect themselves. Admiral Ortiz watched Tender shrink in the distance and felt a profound sense of rightness. Humanity had searched for so long to find their place among the stars. They'd been rejected, feared, misunderstood. Now they'd found their purpose. They were the ones who answered the call when others were in danger. They were the ones who held the line when everything seemed lost. They were the ones who proved that strength without compassion was merely brutality, but compassion with strength was salvation. The SOS had echoed across space 6 weeks ago. The Deathworlder fleet had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.